She found me in her garage on a wintry New Jersey afternoon, a 4-year-old girl padding around in a quilted pink snowsuit, artistically sprinkling powdered gold leaf paint all over the floor like trails of pixie dust. And I was feeling proud of my creation. However, Mrs. Evelyn Castleman, the owner of the house, was not so amused. Surprised by the tiny intruder, she sternly asked me my name. I knew you weren't supposed to tell strangers your name, but oddly enough, I felt safe. I'd been so engaged in my creation, I didn't even know I was lost. Thankfully, she realized I was the youngest child of the new family in the neighborhood. I must have had Houdini-like skills to have navigated my way through 2 backyards, latched fences, down her front steps, and into her garage. She asked if I had an older brother, Daniel, who'd recently set our fence on fire, causing the fire trucks to show up. That's what happens when you have 2 working parents and no adult supervision. Subconsciously, it's probably why I made my escape. Evelyn took me by the hand and led me into the kitchen, served me hot chocolate and cookies while she looked for our phone number. A former nurse, she spent her days cooking, sewing, gardening, making endless batches of cookies for the VA hospital, and taking care of her elderly colleague, Trixie. Her husband, Edward, resting in his Barcalounger, was a rotund, jovial man. They had no children. Their home was beautiful and comforting and had a peaceful, very peaceful feeling about it that I was really unaccustomed to. But what especially caught my eye was the shiny baby grand piano in her living room. Evelyn phoned my mother, who'd been frantic looking for me. She swiftly arrived at the backyard gate, beautiful yet distant, her face framed in a white picket fence arbor, absent of roses. Though relieved, I think she was a little embarrassed she'd lost track of me. She thanked Evelyn and then stayed for coffee. As a latchkey kid, Mrs. C not only saved my life, she became my teacher, confidant, and second mom. She taught me how to care for animals, and her collie Trixie became my new best friend. She taught me to cook and sew and helped me make my dress for my first formal. With Mrs. C, I felt cared for, listened to, and loved. What excited me most was my introduction to classical music and show tunes. We spent hours listening to The King and I, Carousel, and South Pacific. She taught me about Mozart, Beethoven, Dvorak, and Tchaikovsky, especially Van Cliburn, playing Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1 in B-flat minor. A renowned pianist, he'd won the gold medal for the International Tchaikovsky Piano Competition in Moscow. I couldn't get enough of him. In fact, I wanted to be him. After she took me to see him in concert, when we went backstage to congratulate him, I felt I'd touched the hands of God. Later, she asked if I'd like to try out her piano. Oh, I'd been fantasizing about that piano since the moment I saw it. So Mrs. C taught me to play the piano by ear, practicing day after day scales and small pieces, one called a little tarantella. My fingers rolled over the keyboards like giant waves. Every time I struck a key, I felt outside of time, outside of my body. It was exciting and magical, my first experience of true creativity. She fostered my new talent and was so impressed by my abilities. She set up an audition for a piano teacher from New York who was known for shepherding young talent into Juilliard. I practiced day and night for that audition. Everything else melted away. That baby grand piano became part of my body. Every note was in my cells. There was no way I could fail. I never even thought about it. Though my parents were aware of my heavy practice schedule, my mother wasn't happy I was spending so much time with Mrs. C. But when I played a bit of the tarantella for them, I could see they were proud. For the audition, my mother bought me a new dress and tried to curl my super straight hair, to no avail. Finally, the big day arrived. I was among 10 girls who were auditioning for Miss Maslin. We each met her briefly, then patiently awaited our destiny. I was breathless as each name was called. Then it was my turn. I took my place on the bench, and I'll never forget the feeling of confidence that came over me, the feeling that I had mastered this and nothing could go wrong. As I began to play, the sensation of being at one with the universe overtook me. That familiar feeling of being led by a higher force as I played my heart out. It was as if my fingers had brains, like they were riding the crest of a huge wave, and their descent into the curl was the final crescendo. Only with the ring out of the last note did I have any awareness of the room or the people in it. But when I heard the roar of applause and saw the astonished look on Miss Maslin's face, I knew I had nailed it. Afterwards, Miss Maslin spoke to my parents and formally invited me into her elite group of students that she would nurture on their way to Juilliard. They accepted her invitation, and she laid down her strict rules and expectations. After that day, my parents got me my own piano, and I saw less of Mrs. C. My mother had been jealous of the time I spent with her, and when my father became ill, they felt I should spend more time at home. But I missed her a lot. Not a day went by when I didn't yearn to be with her. She had been my advocate, the one who really paid attention to me. But most of all, she got me like nobody else. In this world, that's no small thing. Over the years, I saw her on every trip home until she died in 1993. But I often think back on that day in her garage. Somehow, I must have been seeking her, though I didn't know what I was seeking. And one cold day, in a New Jersey garage, an outstretched hand was there to find me. My escape from home had been a silent scream for help. And I found it, without even asking, in the garage of a total stranger. And in some way, she must have been seeking me too, the daughter she never had. We both shared a spiritual and physical loss. So you never know where you'll find it, or how it'll come. But there she was, shining, bright, loving, and willing. I was lost, and she found me, in the best sense of the word.